There are several problems within the gaming industry that negatively affect consumers. The fact that we're getting physical keys to access content that you have to download and will expire after some time, companies moving away from physical media with digital-only systems, the rampant predatory nature of loot boxes and non-cosmetic microtransactions, the rising prices of video games, the many layoffs in the industry, among others. One problem has received special attention since 2024, and that is the issues surrounding live service games whose servers are disconnected after some time with no hope of accessing the game afterwards. Imagine purchasing a game, spending extra cash on microtransactions, and investing a ton of time into it just to have it shut down without any way of accessing what you paid for afterwards. Stop Killing Games is trying to put a stop to this madness, and there are some that want to see it fail. In this mini documentary, I will discuss in greater detail why this movement exists, its controversies, and why it must succeed for gamers to see a brighter future. Now, Stop Killing Games emerged due to the many games that have had their lives cut short without any way to allow paying customers to continue playing them. The biggest culprit and the standout inspiration for this movement being the game The Crew. This was a racing game that had both single-player and multiplayer modes built in, which launched back in 2014, and it was a game with ratings that were usually less than favorable, but really just average ratings at best. This game was available both digitally and physically, but it always required you to be connected to the internet in order to play it at all, and you had to register it through Uplay, which is Ubisoft's own game launcher. In 2024, this game's servers were shut down, and it didn't just mean that you can't play it online, but rather that you can't play it at all. Even the single-player mode was completely disabled. And some might argue that being upset over a game that was relatively mediocre that lasted about 9 years before it was shut down had a pretty good run, since a lot of people probably weren't really playing it towards the end and were moving on to other things. The issue with this argument is that people who spent money on this game were convinced that they would own it forever. Most people do understand that when it comes to games that only work with online multiplayer, they will get shut down and be made unplayable. But when it comes to a game that has a single-player functionality built in, then it stops to make sense why you should lose access to the whole thing, effectively nullifying your initial $60 investment. Many gamers even had their licenses for these games revoked. This goes against all things related to preservation. So Stop Killing Games has certain goals that it hopes to achieve in order to prevent games from becoming e-waste, or at the very least allow people to have access to what they paid for. Number 1. Transparency from publishers. While we know that pretty much all live service games are doomed to get shut down by the publisher at some point, it's more than fair that we, the consumer, know exactly for how long we will be able to play a certain game if we invest in it. Number 2. Publishers must have end-of-life plans for their games. The expectation is not that publishers support these games indefinitely, because that wouldn't be reasonable. However, if the publisher no longer intends on supporting it, then they should already have an idea of how they will allow customers to continue playing the games that they paid for. This can include games that require an internet connection at all in order to work, microtransactions sold through a game where the servers were shut down, then the items purchased in game would also be disabled, and games that are sold as a service and are expected to shut down at some point. The idea is to get publishers to think about how they will let their customers play their games once they eventually stop supporting them, so that we can play them independently. This will not affect games that are completely free or single-player games that don't require an internet connection to work. And demands are not being made regarding copyright, publishing the code retroactively, forcing publishers to adjust their server infrastructure to comply with this initiative, or even forcing soon-to-release games to comply. This initiative only hopes to change the laws around publishers just shutting down servers whenever they decide to, without a way for consumers to at least be aware of when they could shut down or how they will continue to play when servers do go down. It's about ownership, or at least transparency, not really forcing publishers to give up more than what is necessary. There has been a ton of support for this movement, specifically as of late from YouTubers such as Moist Critical, Steve from Gamers Nexus, Linus Tech Tips, Louis Rossman, Spawnwave, among many others, with even those behind emulators like Dolphin, companies, and the same developers of The Crew who worked on this game. All of these have brought this initiative to the spotlight, and it has gained a lot of traction as a result. Most people who hear about this initiative tend to agree with the message, but there are still some that unfortunately see this as a terrible idea. Among those who want to see this initiative fail is someone known as Pirate Software, an individual who reviewed the information surrounding Stop Killing Games but misinterpreted many of the goals of this initiative. This gentleman's commentary has certainly caused some damage to this cause, at the very least in the short term. Now, Pirate Software spoke of the initiative needing to specify that it is targeting single-player games, even though the initiative includes all sorts of games with an unknown expiration date, both single and multiplayer games. However, the initiative is only hoping to inspire change where money is involved. Also, this only affects games that will be made in the future, and it is not retroactive to existing games or games that are expected to release relatively soon, as to not expect these publishers to somehow rethink the ways that they organize their servers. He also mentions that the initiative wanted to force developers to turn their multiplayer games into single-player games once they decided to stop supporting them. This would only be incredibly unreasonable if it were true. This initiative is only asking that future games be made with end-of-life plans to ensure that gamers will be able to access the games that they paid for, but publishers would still be in charge of deciding how they do this. The initiative isn't asking publishers for specific ways of doing anything. And even though it states on the headline of this presentation that the initiative will not require publishers to endlessly support a game, require publishers to give up source code, or require them to give up intellectual properties of any kind, he still assumed that the initiative will require publishers to do these, at the very least, that they will be expected to support games forever. Perhaps he just misread the header and skipped down to the point, but the initiative is not asking for publishers to do any of these things. The spreading of this misinformation to what is effectively a much larger audience than Curse Farms, the founder of this initiative, did cause a lot of issues. Pirate Software continued to double down on these, no matter how many people responded to his claims in attempts to correct him. This certainly did cause some damage to the initiative, something that Ross noted himself. In an attempt to correct any misinformation surrounding Stop Killing Games, Ross even tried to speak with Pirate Software directly, but he unfortunately refused. Declining to engage in conversation has never been a good method of getting support for a cause, or the opposition of one for that matter. These takes and behavior are disheartening and even puzzling to hear from someone who has gained so much respect over the years. Sadly, this did make the fight for this initiative more difficult, and it soured things for some, but it never made it impossible. The point of this initiative is to begin negotiating with publishers so that we can find a middle ground, hence why some of the wording on the initiative is more broad in its writing. This initiative is only taking place in the EU at this time, since Ross was not able to get very far with Canada, the United States, but if this initiative goes through, then it could finally get the government to discuss how to move forward with it, which can eventually lead to a compromise between publishers and the consumer, where we don't lose complete access to purchase games once they decide to cut the cord. The expectation isn't that things will be perfect if everything goes through, and it could cause some live service games to have their lives cut short as a result. But once these things get ironed out, then most games should be protected in some way. This initiative must succeed so that there is much clearer communication between the publisher and the customer about what to expect, and they will still be able to access these games in some way once servers inevitably shut down. This would be a huge win for the consumer if it goes through, at least in the EU for the time being. Now, considering how much attention an issue like this has gotten in the United States from YouTubers and the general gaming public, then perhaps it could even make its way here too. But I don't foresee something like this even being considered here, sadly. But hopefully, I'm wrong about that. There were so many concerns that this initiative would not succeed, but as of the posting of this video, this petition has exceeded 1 million signatures. But there are still concerns that there are a lot of invalid signatures since it reached that number so quickly since the controversy began. So the stretch goal, for lack of better words, is 1.4 million to try and negate the impact of any invalid signatures. And that only leaves us with only about 26 days from the posting of this video to reach their goal. But in this incredibly short time, the slowing of the momentum has been quelled by the overwhelming support of the community, and this movement's received far more attention since the Pirate Software controversy. I can't sign this because I live in the US, but if you live in the EU, then this is an opportunity that you should try to take advantage of. You will find links below if you wish to sign the EU petition. It was very tough to talk about Stop Killing Games without really discussing the controversy surrounding Pirate Software, but hopefully you found this video helpful and informative. If you're new to this channel, I make mini documentaries on retro gaming and tech, with many more coming soon. And if you liked this style of videos, then let me know in the comments and subscribe. I also always appreciate when you share these videos because it helps the channel grow. Now, thank you so much for watching. Leave your suggestions in the comments for future bite-sized documentaries. And until next time.